Welcome all to the first webinar of Dharam Bharti Mission. DBM, as we call Dharam Bharti Mission, is a humanitarian organization working to create lasting change in the lives of children, families, and communities living in poverty and injustice. DBM serves all people, regardless of religion, caste, race, ethnicity, or gender. DBM is working towards the mission of hunger free India, and the methodology adopted for achieving the same is 3E, that is, education, employment, and empowerment. We believe that if we give equal opportunity of education and employment to all, especially the underprivileged, and if we empower them, they can be removed from hunger permanently. We also believe that all Indians should be responsible citizens and should contribute towards nation building, and not just some government and some NGOs. So, as a part of this belief, we work with a lot of volunteers who, like us, are passionate to do their bit to help their less fortunate brethren. Most of these are youth, and therefore, we thought it fit to organize this dialogue with them to understand what is their perspective about the present times, when almost the entire world is in lockdown. Today, nobody has the answers to most of the questions that we have. We do not know where we are heading. What will be the shape of the world post COVID 19? Late President John F. Kennedy is reported to have said the Chinese use two brushstrokes to write the word crisis. One brushstroke stands for danger and the other for opportunity. So, in a crisis, we have to be aware of the danger, but we have also to recognize the opportunity. So, to make sense of all this, we are here today and we have three very esteemed speakers with us, whom I shall introduce shortly. We welcome Mr. KP Singh, Mr. Manak Singh, and Mr. Anish Gawande. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us. And we thank all the young friends today who have joined us in this first webinar of DBM, and we welcome them all. The format of the talk today will be as follows. Initially, all the three speakers will speak roughly for 8 to 10 minutes, and then we will take up the questions. The participants can send their questions on the chat, and we will forward them to the speakers. Some questions we have already received, and we have already forwarded to the speakers. So without much ado, we will start today's program. Our first speaker today is the young and dynamic Mr. Anish Gawande. Anish is a writer and a translator. He is the director of Dara Shikoh Fellowship and the co-founder of Pink List India. Anish graduated with degree in comparative literature and society from Columbia University and is currently a Rhodes Scholar pursuing a degree in intellectual history at Oxford University. Welcome once again, Anish, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Paramjit ji. Just going to check, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Just perfect. So firstly, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak at this panel. I think these are discussions that are incredibly important to have and are going to fundamentally transform the way we look at the societies we've created and the future we imagine for ourselves in the years to come. I think this is an unprecedented pandemic. None of us who are alive in the world today have seen anything like this before. And it presents, like you said, a crisis and an opportunity. That this is the time the young people are asking questions like, what does the post-COVID world look like? And what can we change about the world that we haven't been able to for so long? And more than anything else, I think it's given all of us a lot of time to think because we've all been stuck at home. And the stay home, stay safe has also given some of us the opportunity to reflect upon our own actions, the actions of those who've come before us, and how we want to shape things to go in the future. I think one example I want to bring up, because I think COVID-19 relief is something a lot of people on this panel right now have been working on. Paramjit ji, you also, I know, have been going out onto the field and working on this quite a bit. I think it's a good micro picture that shows us the larger macro picture, right? I think the biggest learning has been that this pandemic is unprecedented and unique. In usual disaster relief situations, you set up a booth or a kiosk and people come to you. What it means is in a drought, I set up one sort of stall for each village. Everyone comes to that stall and relief work gets processed that way. What we've seen in the COVID-19 pandemic is that our response has to be hyperlocal. That we've had to go that extra mile and say that if there is a needy person, I don't have to just set up a stall in an area where the needy person can come to. I have to manage to get it till that needy person's doorstep. So it's required all of us to think hyperlocal. It put the spotlight again on organizations and individuals that work with these communities for a much larger time. Educational institutions, religious institutions, and other community-led spaces have become most important centers of COVID-19 relief. And the future that it's pointing out towards us, and for young people also all around, is that the future is going to look hyperlocal. And this doesn't just mean that we're going to buy local or sort of go into those modalities, but we have to start thinking about our neighborhoods and our communities as self-sustaining units. I think the biggest lesson for me throughout COVID-19 has been how can young people come together and build sort of local systems of giving back, of accountability, of making sure that we build for ourselves a future that we want in a way that we can see the impact. A small example I would like to give, and this is because I work a lot in the field of electoral politics. So politics is something that I engage with on a day-to-day. What this pandemic has taught us more than ever is that for those of us living in Mumbai, the biggest response has come from the BMC. And the only possible response has come from the BMC, an institution that all of us across the board have neglected. It's an institution where elections see the lowest rate of voter turnout. It's an election where the lowest percentage of young people vote. I don't know how many young people across the board, how many of us on this call today know who our cooperator is. But it's today our cooperator who is in charge of doing COVID-19 relief, in charge of health, in charge of sanitation. And at this point, it's important for us to ask, why don't we know this? And in the future moving forward, when we deal with calamities like these, when we deal with emergencies like these, how are we going to hold our elected leaders responsible? And not just our MPs and our MLAs and our PM or our CM, but those we elect directly. A cooperator takes 8,000 votes to win an election. If only 500 young people in each constituency start voting, they have the power to hold that person accountable and say, listen, this is the future we imagine for ourselves. This is what you need to pay attention to. This opens up a lot of possibilities, right? I think this opens up the possibilities for how we reimagine a more inclusive future. I think with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen marginalized communities, those that live at the fringe of society, being the hardest hit. We've had to come up with ways to support these communities in times of need. I'll give you an example. We do a lot of work in Bhiwandi. There's a large dumping ground over there. These are rag picker communities that depend on daily wage labor and that have been left completely abandoned. Now, communities have had to step up and take care of rag picker communities living by dumping grounds right now. How can we start thinking about including these communities in our ideas of what it means to create more just societies? So in a post-COVID world, how are we going to start thinking of every segment of society? And when we create policies, when we create NGOs, when we create any sort of organization, how are we going to see that it reflects the diversity of the people that make up this country? Because we are the most diverse country in the world. And I think finally, it's a time when we need to start thinking about how different sections of society, I think, caste occupations like rag pickers, the LGBTQI plus community, particularly the transgender community, which has been particularly badly hit by the pandemic. These are all communities that require sustained support. And how are we going to come together as communities to provide that support? And finally, how are we going to start using our voices as young people to demand what we have not been able to demand so far effectively? One of the questions that came up, and we'll of course address this a little further ahead, is, how do we tackle pollution? How do we tackle climate change? How do we make these topics of conversation? What's incredibly important to me is that young people today form a bulk of the Indian population. What young India will think today is what our policymakers, our NGOs, our corporate institutions will do tomorrow. We have to start setting the terms of the debate instead of merely following what has been set for us. If we want to make climate change an issue, all of us need to start speaking up about it. We need to start holding our employers accountable for it. We need to hold our own families accountable for it, our housing societies accountable for it, and our politicians accountable for it. And we need to start demanding accountability for them on the issues that we've raised. That if we've elected you, if we put you in this position of power, then have you taken any action on these fronts? I think finally, I want to add that as we move towards a post-COVID world, however that's going to look, we don't even know what that post-COVID world is going to look like right now, because we don't have any answers as to how long this pandemic will continue, to how long this crisis will continue affecting us. One thing that we should all keep in mind is that the future is going to look very different from what it looks like now. One, because it's going to be far more digital in ways that we haven't imagined before. For a lot of people, my generation, a lot of the work that we do doesn't depend upon where we live or where we physically stay. Twitter just a week ago said that it's going to enforce this policy that all employees can work from home for the rest of their lives if they want to. So the dependence on a physical office, this idea that you live where you work and where you live determines where you work and vice versa, is slowly crumbling away. And what opportunities does that present to young people like us? Does that mean that we can think of futures that involve us living in multiple places? Does that involve a future in which we can be far more mobile? Does that involve a future in which our cities don't look as congested as they are right now? And what does that mean for the social relations that we're going to form in the years to come? I think these are the big ticket questions that a lot of us, friends and I and other young people I know have been grappling with. And these are questions that we need to keep thinking about. A more inclusive future, a more local future, and a more digital future where all of us need to contribute locally while not necessarily be tied to the local for things like work or employment. With that, I think the time is also up.
Thank you, Anish. Thank you. Thank you for this informative talk. However, you said that I agree with the first fact that it has to be more inclusive. The young have to be more active and start, dealing about the issues which they have neglected, and also that it will be more digital. But I feel that digital, if it is more digital, then it will not be inclusive because most of our population in India does not have access to, the digital media. They're not digitally literate. And that is what we are facing this problem in Dharam Bharati Mission. Of course, we'll come to that afterwards, but thank you very much for spotlighting those issues. Yeah, our next speaker, we'll move on to the next speaker, Mr. Manak Singh. Manak Singh is a serial entrepreneur and an active entrepreneurship evangelist with a deep-rooted passion to impact enterprising minds and entrepreneurs across scale and stage. His present enterprise is a unique B2B2C. He's already very digital, actually, as you can see. So B2B2C consumer tech platform, Yonomi. It's a version of economy which is very digital, to drive consumer behavior and engagement using principles of gamification, R&R, and social commerce. With 25 plus years of building biz tech enterprises across various domains, CRM systems, BPMS, e-commerce, and platforms for entrepreneurs, Manak excels in the science and art of facilitation and is also a certified leadership coach with the Leadership Circle, a global network of leadership development coaches. He's an active advisor, coach, mentor to large and young enterprises and has been actively advocating Ask and Inspire as a paradigm shift in leadership style, along with a complementing cultural shift in making organizations and entrepreneurial outlook young and relevant. So he is the most apt person to deal with the young population that we have today in the audience. Over to you, Manak, and welcome again.
Thank you, Virji. I just want to applaud all of us who've taken the time out. I see 240 plus participants. This is amazing. And it just shows that how a phenomena like this, and like Anish rightly mentioned, is unprecedented for all of us. So I just want to start by quickly echoing one point that was mentioned right at the beginning. I don't think this forum really is about answers. Nobody has the right answers, right? But I think it's an apt time to ask as many relevant questions, explore as many relevant perspectives. And before I share some thoughts and themes, I just want to reflect on a couple of points that were triggered by Anish. I think, to sum it up, Anish, you summed it up beautifully by saying, hey, the future is different. And, it can't get more exciting for an entrepreneurial mind, or if I may even broad base that, an enterprising mind, because enterprising minds think different, right? Second point, I just want to, you mentioned more inclusive, more local, more digital. And Paramjit Virji, you mentioned that digital may be a challenge because many are not so, or even if they're digitally connected, they may not be very well. And I think herein lies the opportunity. And I'll reflect on that a bit more below. In line with the theme and some of the questions that have been raised, I think the whole idea is to look out at pain points and how is it that we can carve out opportunities out of this. So friends, let me just quickly share with you some thoughts, some perspectives, some themes, and then let's initiate this as a dialogue, and not in the quest for answers necessarily, but in the quest to co-create opportunities for ourselves. So let me start by sharing with you a theme which is my pet favorite, and that is an unfair advantage. How do you discover your unfair advantage? And I think what COVID really has brought about is a level playing field, because everybody is affected by it. And those of us who can possibly respond to it better, respond to it differently, can possibly, discover an unfair advantage in a way and manner where it benefits the rest. So I don't mean it as an advantage in any other sense. And I think for us Indians, we are very well positioned because life doesn't come easy to us. We are surrounded by adversity and challenges, which renders us naturally enterprising. And I think this is what I just want to somewhere trigger, and if I may say, anchor in our minds, that we have a very interesting unfair advantage today to respond to this, fairly ambiguous environment and future that we are getting into. So let's discover our unfair advantage, and we can speak about this as we move along. Some other COVID-specific themes that I want to highlight, through the entrepreneurial lens. And I'm obviously not getting too specific to start with, because I would like all of us to first, internalize how do we, with what mindset do we approach this whole scenario? So one point, and I was going through the questions, I think gone are the days where one sits down and say, hey, what is relevant for me? What out there is relevant for me? Right? I feel perhaps, and especially now in COVID, one ought to step out of the comfort zone and say, hey, how can I be relevant to something out there? Now, this is very important, right? Somewhere even Anish alluded to this point. How do we go out there and look out for areas, environment where we can be relevant, right? So that's one theme. The second is opportunity and uncertainty. Today, as we sit where we are, the world seems to be full of pain points all around. There were always pain points. And an entrepreneurial mind gets excited when you look at pain points, because pain points can, deliver opportunities. Now, how do we look at these opportunities? How do we identify and look at addressing pain points is something that we've got to look at. So that's another point, theme, pain point. Pain points can present opportunities. Next, while we are looking at all of this, I think what's very important is, and something that has been a fairly strong guiding principle in my life, is placing purpose before activity. Purpose is the what, activity is the how. So before we rush into the how, let's look at what kind of purpose can we serve out there. in whatever way, with whatever sensitivities, uh, experience or education that we have. And I think that's the third theme, right? So how is it that I can place purpose before activity? And finally, one thing that has come out very strongly in this, in these past few months is if I may say, the blessed role of technology. Technology was anyway changing the way we live, but I think what technology has helped us in this phase has clearly highlighted this role as an enabler, right? But I want to give a layer on that, and I think what's going to be a differentiator is how does one make innovative use of technology. Technology is all around. So if you look at Zoom today, right, uh, there are business models being, which are being born fresh on Zoom. So how is it that we can apply some of the principles on top and various other perspectives and make innovative use of technology, to make an impact? So just to recap the four themes per se, and of course there are many more perspectives. This is not, one is how can we be relevant to the environment? Let's ask ourselves that. Second is how can we look at opportunity and uncertainty or pain points? How can we, place purpose before activity and accordingly approach things? And then finally, let's get innovative, right? How do we now make innovative use of technology? So that's one. These were four themes. To recap, I think this is the best time for the young. And when I say young, I don't just mean the young by age. I think the young by mind. It's a different conversation that we can have some other time, but it's the best time to get enterprising. What do I mean by get enterprising? I don't just mean being entrepreneurial. I don't just mean that you go out there and start businesses. I think it's all about being enterprising, explore, look around. This clearly is business unusual, right? So most usual businesses or usual models are getting disrupted and will get disrupted. So how can we get enterprising? Second, how can we co-create and collaborate? No one person can do it all anyway. And in current times, it's even more challenging. So let's go out there and look out for co-creators. Let's align with co-creators, right? You may not, whether you have the idea or you don't have the idea, somebody else has an idea. So step out and step up, right? That's critical. Finally, I think variabilization. You've got to variabilize life. There is no constant anymore for some time to come. So get out of your comfort zones. Look at variable scenarios in your career choices, in your business ideas, and approach life in a much more. And I think being young is amazing in times like this because you anyway have a high risk appetite, right? You have an entire life ahead of you, and like Anish, spelled out some areas. There's so much that can be done. So I just wanted to first put these thoughts on the table. Virji, how much time do we have? Because there are some points that can be taken on later also.
You have 1 minute more, 1 to 2 minutes more.
So to sum it up, friends, my if I may say, takeaway from the last few months, and like Anish and all of us have said, no one alive today has seen anything like this. But I, for one, am extremely optimistic that there is going to be, and again going back, the future is going to be different, but it is going to be very exciting. The mindset with which we approach it is going to be critical. There are a lot of newer business, models coming up, and what I'll keep that for the later Q&A points because some of the questions will get addressed by that. So Vijay, with that, I just want to kind of sum it up for now and then move ahead.
Thanks, Manak. Thank you very much. As you said, it's always the good time to be young,
Oh, yes.
The young always have the best. So, and as you rightly said, this is also the best time for the young. But the only thing the young want to know actually how they can be more enterprising. What you have rightly said is, and you have been emphasizing this, I know, Padak, that we have to co-create and collaborate. Nobody can do so. We have to look at things, how we can co-create things, and we can collaborate. And the other thing that you mentioned, that uh, innovative use of technology, that of course, as we mentioned, as Anish has also mentioned, that technology has to be leveraged, in our country where we have been avoiding for so long. We can now put technology to better use. Things like, in the rural areas where we do not have the doctors, so we can start using telemedicine. Where we do not have brick and mortar schools, we can use technology to teach, as we are now doing, and we have been avoiding that earlier. Now it has shown us that we have to leverage technology if we really want to go ahead. So this is the lesson we should take, and the young are looking forward to do their bit in this. After activism and politics that Anish said, and about economy that Manak mentioned, now we'll move on to the sector where youth are most affected, that is education. And the best person to speak on that is Mr. KP Singh, our next speaker. KP Singh is the founder and CEO of the Institute of Management and Foreign Studies, India's first and largest test preparation center for studies abroad. He serves as the head counselor and chief verbal faculty at IMFS, and is also the visionary responsible for the growth of this company. It is across his 23-year-long journey with IMFS, Mr. Singh has helped 50,000 students to attain their dreams, and in doing so has won numerous awards for excellence in education. And for the last 3 consecutive years, he has been winning this. A member of management committees of colleges in Mumbai. He has appeared on several talk shows on studies abroad, on channels such as CNBC, etc. He has addressed hundreds of seminars in colleges and schools across India, and has been recognized as a pioneer of test prep for foreign education in India. He is a regular contributor and writes columns for Times of India, in the Sun Times, Telangana Today, etc., relating to foreign studies. He addresses seminars to encourage students for further studies on regular basis, and has recently also presented a TEDx talk and led the IMFS team to the top 7 education companies in the world. Congratulations, KP, and thank you very much for joining. I'm sure the youth are looking forward to hearing from you. So we welcome you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think I should explain the context of a word that Manak Virji used, and the word was Virji. To those of you who are unaware of how Punjabi is used, Manak Virji is an amazing user of words. He plays with words wonderfully, and his philosophy and thought process behind that is pretty commendable. So it's amazing that the word Virji in Punjabi refers to older brother, and I've heard him call his son also as Virji, which signifies that great process of learning that he is inculcated in all that he can, and from everybody that he can get knowledge from. So today's talk has been very enlightening, and I'm so glad that I was able to listen to Anish and Manak Virji again. Both of you are accomplished speakers, and therefore for me it's going to be a tough process to take it from there. But the kind of questions that have been thrown at me for the last now 2 months, what stands out is that there is fear. And this fear obviously has been propounded earlier by both my distinguished colleagues, and of course Paramveer Virji as well, has largely come from COVID-19. So we're living in a world that, and this completely uncharted territory. So we're living in a world that nobody imagined just 4, maybe 5 months ago. So things have turned topsy-turvy. And when I used to go to colleges and speak in seminar sessions and tell kids that, look, the next 5 years or 10 years, this is where the world can and shall be. Today, I look back and I say, whoa, really? Maybe, maybe not. But what stands out is the conversation that all the 3 speakers have had with you today. And what stands out is technology is going to be at the center of whatever we perceive and whatever we can do in the next maybe 10, 15 years. So we'll talk more of technology. And I'm sure there are kids who are in their 10th and 11th listening to me on this talk. So I hope this talk can help you. But before we go ahead anywhere, um, just this COVID-19, the coronavirus that has come, it's minuscule, it's microscopic, but it has made us aware today of how small and insignificant the human race really is. So we are looking at now awakening to the ponderous realities of life in the last maybe 5 months. And as this pandemic is proving to us in multifarious manners that we are now aware of what is important and what is not, what is meaningful and what is worthy of our attention. And if the shift of consciousness, what is making us aware what we should be doing, what we should be avoiding, if it is true in the social, health, and the political arenas, as referred to by Anish earlier, well, it's also equally true for the world of education. And therefore, it's only just right that we get our priorities and transitions sorted for a world post-COVID-19. And we therefore have to take a step back and identify things that need to be changed. So either we do that or we accept the reality of the changed world and do just about nothing about it. So the question that needs to be answered is, do we see the current situation as an insurmountable challenge, as both the speakers prior to me spoke about? And then do we surrender ourselves to the vagaries of chance, or that's a choice we have? Or do we take a stand and make changes to our lifestyle that shall address this newly realized realities of society? So what we need to do is to take this as an opportunity, as Manak Virji so correctly propounded, and take this opportunity to improvise and implement long-term policies that will completely overhaul existing teaching, learning paradigms. As Paramjit Virji spoke maybe just 5 minutes ago, that somehow we come to the party kind of late. If you look at the attitude we have had as a nation as a whole, we have always said we will do it. Kar lenge, ho jayega, dekhenge. And we've lived in that beautiful dream world of ours where everything was perfectly fine, not realizing the world has taken a quick pace. Look at China, a country that actually started teaching English to its population hardly 10 years ago, suddenly has now got a population in the last 10 years that can speak English pretty well. It created for itself a timeline. The time plan was by 2025, there would be world leaders in the virtual world, in the world of IT or cybersecurity and networking and so on and so forth. So while they were talking of a certain goal by 2025, this is what we will achieve. We are late onto the party already. So while we talk of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan in India and strive to ensure it goes to the farthest and the furthest remotest societies or corners of our country, you see that country as one that we can obviously model at least our education system on. It is shocking and it's appalling that we spend not more than 3% of our GDP on education, when any country that needs to really go out of its bounds and grow, it has to spend at least 5 to 6% of its GDP on education. We spend 3%, and that's a government statistic. And what is statistic and what is reality, we both know, may not be the same. So that is one thing that we need to understand, that the focus has to be, and increasing because of COVID-19, spending much more money on our information technology systems so that we're able to reach into the farthest and remotest parts of the country where, of course, another nation called Bharat lives. We are, of course, living in a great place called India. But we have to also grow together, the Bharat and the India together for, of course, the society to grow. Therefore, this new reality of COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to serve the world in a big way. And of course, to bring in students from all strata of society, and IT will be the, of course, enabler to that. But the sad fact of the matter is that even today, and it pains me to say that even today, students are left bereft of a great education for want of several things. One is a lack to access to a good quality education system, one that encompasses brilliant faculty or a good curriculum, and of course the infrastructure that is required to support and enable the art of learning. We lack those. I understand that, as every speaker will tell you before or the last 20 years, that we're a growing country, so money is scarce commodity, it has multiple demands, but we need to prioritize. And education is the only way we can come out of this quagmire. And therefore, our policies must consider competency-based skills that help employability. And this will require a serious realignment of the curriculum towards skills that we need to develop. And post-corona, I do not believe that finding an employment opportunity or a job will be simple for anyone. And therefore, as Manakvirji said earlier, entrepreneurship skills and substantive leadership skills will be needed to be taught in much greater percentage than they are today. And one thing that needs to change post-COVID-19 is going to be to adopt this new system of doing away with theoretical studies. If it is, for example, a 4-year program that we are learning, then the 3rd year, you do not encourage the child to come to college or school at all. You push him into the industry where he learns skills that will empower him to actually put into practice what he's learning theoretically. And that is why universities and colleges will have to be facilitators and enablers. Let them not think about them being the sole providers of knowledge. Wisdom, be far from it. But what they need to do is to enable choice-based learning. And that is extremely important. And of course, support that by online training evaluation processes. And it has to be that education is not driven by research of the markets, what the requirements and the needs are of the market, and therefore tailor the courses accordingly. And that therefore will become the basis of the almanac and of course the curriculum that will facilitate that a student who graduates from these colleges and universities is able either to find employment or create unemployment. Let us be clear that post-COVID-19, it is impossible that we find jobs for everybody. It has to be an entrepreneurial spirit that has to be encouraged. That's what, of course, Manakvirji is going to talk much more about. And that is why it is imperative that universities blend our marking system as well to reflect the new reality of society. You really cannot have that same 80% marks for theory and 20% marks for practical. It has to be turned on its head and give more percentage, if not 50-50, I hope more percentage to grading on a practical knowledge system than on theoretical knowledge system. And of course, if you are young, please understand this is the time for you to start learning languages. That's going to be the new mantra for success. Learn new languages, understand which country is going to grow the most, and therefore learn languages accordingly. So if I were you, I'd be learning Mandarin. I would like to learn Japanese, which is pretty difficult, but do that. And of course, one of the most spoken languages in the world, Spanish. Proceed to learn these languages because the world is going to become a homogeneous unit as time progresses. And therefore, modes of learning should not be the constraint. And like everything else, if that mode of learning can be pushed onto the online platform, I see there is a lot of hope for the future. And if you're young and you're thinking of what the future holds for you, well, it is a wonderful future. Do not be perturbed. Don't be scared. Please understand there are opportunities waiting for you in the world of robotics and automation. And COVID-19, you'll see this bringing even more to bringing it to more light as well. So if robotics and automation and AI and machine learning is a way to go, but if you're not an engineer, please understand that the world of nursing and therapy is going to be big as well in the days to come. Please remember, you're the youth of India, and it's a huge treasure we hold. Understand the world is becoming geriatric. If you look at Europe, look at Germany, look at all countries in Europe, they are all populations of 40, 50 and beyond. They will need help from the youth of India in these two areas. Physical health, therapy, nursing. In fact, a research survey said just last year that 20 years from today, nursing will be the #1 job in the world. And I'm seeing that becoming truer and truer as time passes by. So physical therapy, occupational therapy, these are all going to be a big time. And of course, as Anish spoke earlier, sustainability or environmental engineering or learning those will become crucial as well. So whatever be the field, if you're able to marry something called analytics to it, so whether I'm looking at design thinking, whether I'm looking at digital marketing, all of these have tremendous scope for the future, which means you as a student cannot You cannot really sit down in your haunches and say, I have arrived in the world. You have to fight and battle and find your way through a new world. And that's possible only via advanced learning. And of course, as when questions pop up, we'll talk more of opportunities in various countries. But before I wind up, a few sentences again. I do not believe that life will be normal any longer. I think everybody agrees that. And people keep wondering whether things will go back on track. But I'll tell you what, the track itself has changed. And therefore, there is no going back on track, and there is no normal anymore. The future shall now deal with your willingness to adopt and adapt changes. And therefore, you got to be open to new and better ways of doing things and realize that change is not bad. It's the way we react to it that shall and will make all the difference. You have to find the tools to meet with the changed circumstances within yourself. And if they're not going to manifest from outside, they have to come from within and inside of you. And it's the process of your growing up to know that you are more than what you achieve. And I'd like you to listen to that sentence again. It's a process of your growing up, and you have to know that you are worth more than what you achieve. You are more relevant than the college you went to and the grades you received. Live your life and celebrate your existence without being bound by statistics of where you went to college or what your marks were. Please enjoy this journey of life. And education is simply one wheel that will ensure that your journey becomes smoother. So embrace it. We as a society have really great expectations of the world, of the youth of today. And therefore, we exhort you to dream big and live up to achieving these dreams. And don't let this time shape you or what you will or can be. I like to end this with a small, simple quote, which is, there are years in which you make careers, and then there are years in which you're able to shape your character. I believe the next 2 years are going to underline what kind of a human being and a character you will be. And I'm sure that you will endeavor to make the best of life. With this, we are, I hope, open to a Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you, Kanwar. That was very, very emphatic. And what we have been, always hearing, that it is the fittest that survive, and those who can adapt and change, those will survive. So what we used to read, now it has become a reality, and all of us have to keep on adapting and changing if we wish to survive in this post-COVID world. And you mentioned about the new areas like healthcare, robotics, analytics, and all those things. So youth have a direction now, at least where it can go. Now, we'll not waste much time. We'll directly go to questions. We'll follow the same ranking. We'll move to Anish first. I've passed on some question to Anish. Can you, Anish, please go ahead with the questions? You are muted, Anish.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead. I have 3 questions asked of me. I'm going to read them out quickly. One is a question from Ananya, which is about what will happen after the pandemic has withered down. Will people have to wear masks and other protection? And which economic sectors will recover the fastest and the slowest? So I think for this question, I think Kanwarji has already answered which are the sectors that are going to benefit and sort of become more relevant in a post-COVID world. I think the slowest, what we've been seeing is FMCGs and any part of the service industry that depends on physical spaces is going to take some time to open up and be impacted in ways that we don't know yet. So any consumer-facing industry, be it the aviation industry or the hospitality industry, has taken a huge hit. A lot of them are finding innovative ways to stay relevant and to remain relevant. How quickly they can bounce back onto their feet is going to determine how the global shape of something like travel and tourism in the years to come looks like. I think which ones will recover the fastest? I think that will be your tech space. It'll be your EdTech is going to take a big sort of leap. I know a lot of development firms are working on EdTech, and Premji, as you rightly pointed out, that's a major challenge in India that we don't have connectivity. In fact, 2 days ago, we had a large call with a lot of students from DU, because Delhi University has said that they will do the 3rd year exams online. Now, because of a lot of students being in places all over the country, some in Kashmir where there's no internet, some in rural villages in South India, the reality is that it's not really easy to do online exams for most parts of our population today. But that is going to be something that people are going to have to innovate on, innovate quickly. So I think that any edtech solution, any digital solution is going to benefit and recover quickly. I think another sector that will recover is any collaborative enterprise which is restructuring the economy right now. So you can see consulting firms sort of getting a lot more work right now just to sort of figure out what the future for each company is going to look like. But that's all I'll say for now. I think for whether we will have to keep wearing masks and other protections, nobody knows yet, and nobody knows for how long. I think I used to work in Hong Kong, and the strange reality was that in Hong Kong, most people wear masks most of the year anyway. And this was even before COVID. So I don't know if that's a world we're moving towards. I don't know if that's a world that we're going to be staring at. I certainly hope not. But that's a question that I think the healthcare experts will answer. I think measures that parents should take for their children who are at developing stage of their physical and mental growth. This is a very important question, I think. I think this is also a question that highlights a few points that Manakji and Kamarji have been speaking about. One is that for anybody who is learning right now, for anybody who's in school or in college right now, the most important thing is understanding that the world doesn't look the same way it looked 20 years ago. So sort of pushing doctor, lawyer, engineer, and this is a trope. I think most people have spoken about this. People have continuously said that, you know, your kids might have talents in fields that did not exist when you were growing up. And they might be able to make incredibly successful careers in those fields. So I'd say for those, give them a chance to explore, give them a chance to sort of develop their interests and provide a space where you give encouragement. And that doesn't mean blindly accept what your kids are doing, of course. It doesn't mean that they come up with a harebrained scheme and it's not going to go anywhere. Go with it blindly, but at least engage, encourage, and work with them and treat them as equal stakeholders. I think we've gone beyond a point when sort of there is that power dynamic of you listen to what your parents say and that's what you do with your life. I think today a lot of people in my generation and those younger than me are saying that, you know, we're going to have a conversation about this. And that doesn't mean that you're disrespecting your parents. It doesn't mean that you are going against your parents. It simply means that you come with certain ideas, certain thoughts that you bring to the table, and you're willing to engage. And that's a philosophy I think everyone needs to work with. And it opens up the door for more honest conversations with your children. And this goes on to a lot of things, right? I think I deal a lot with gender and sexuality. A lot of kids who are coming out to their parents, being accepted for who they are. There are a lot of kids who face bullying, who don't feel like they can tell their parents about it because they don't know what their parents will think. So a lot of these other psychosocial factors also are things that we need to take into account. I think we're seeing mental health also becoming an incredibly important issue. Taking that seriously and ensuring that your children are receiving the support that they need is essential right now. I think these are sort of issues that are coming up in the 21st century that nobody knows how to deal with, but we have to be open to responding to them. And the final question from Ishika is about how can we alter our lives to maintain the current levels of pollution and prevent it to going back from where it was? This is a very difficult question because we don't know what's going to happen after COVID, right? What we've seen a sudden stopping of industry. The world, for the first time in history, has come to a complete standstill. For the first time, everything has come to a grinding halt. So we've seen, like, you know, Bombay has clearer skies than I've ever seen before. You've been able to see in Chandigarh, you can see the Himalayas. And so we're seeing a very different, strange reality. What is it going to look like when it all suddenly starts? Somebody wrote a beautiful piece about migratory birds. What are they going to do? Suddenly all flights have not been operating. And if they have been only cargo flights on a very reduced scale, what happens to sort of patterns of nature and how they adapt when we begin? And these are questions that we need to start thinking about. I would have ideally said that to counter the pollution levels that we have right now, this was a golden time if we had the foresight to deal with it, to carry out environmental audits. And oftentimes with a lot of sustainability measures, the problem is that to implement them, the factory has to be shut. And that's something nobody can afford to do. to put in a filter or to sort of put in these processes. It takes time, it takes shutting down, right? You have that chance right now. I'm hoping that people who own factories, people who are working in this industry proactively take these measures and see what a more sustainable world looks like. Because you're right that the levels of climate change that we're heading towards are just not sustainable. Finally, I want to just add one last point going back to politics, because I think this is a very good question that a lot of people need to now start looking at politics as a profession. I think we've ignored that for young people so far. So for a lot of young people on this call right now, please start thinking about getting into positions of leadership within government, within politics, within elected and unelected positions, because we need young people there right now. For how long are we going to sustain ourselves by saying it's not for us, it's something that we don't want to engage with? It's a booming field. It's never going to stop booming. There's always space. And you step up, I think you'll be able to go far. So if anybody has questions on that, of course, right now, after that, how to enter, what to do, how to build a career there, always happy to answer there. And that's where I think I have answered a lot of these questions. The others are for the others to answer.
Thank you, Anish. Thank you. And for the listeners, we can tell them that Anish is actually quite actively participating in the, not exactly in the political, but actively participating in the civil issues. And he's been taking up very openly. He's already featuring in a lot of newspapers that work he does. And he's been doing good work. And thank you for opening up this area also, politics also. Yes, we must think of that area for the youth, so that good people can come and change their politics. We'll move on to Manak. Manak, please. I've already passed on the questions to you. Can we have that? You are muted, Manak. Yes. Manak, you are muted. Manak, you're still muted actually. If you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I think I was muted by the host. So
Yeah,
great. I'm back.
Right.
I think I just want to quickly, before I get into some of the questions that have been asked of me, but I just want to really, and I'm very, if I may say, enthused and both encouraged by the dialogue that we've had today. All our speakers have given such amazing perspectives. And frankly, some of the questions that have been asked have in many ways been responded to already in the narratives. But the first question is from Noor Singh. How will the economy recover post-COVID? And what is the lesson that we can learn? So one is, how will the economy recover? The other way of asking the same question is, in what shape and form? And one thing that's been very clearly articulated and is being observed, that is going to be, nobody has an accurate answer, but definitely there are certain patterns and trends that are emerging in various areas. Sectors are being redefined. The way work is happening is being redefined. The prioritization of economic recovery in itself is going to be, a very interesting trend to watch out for. So clearly, and as perhaps the lockdown has, highlighted for us, any non-discretionary consumption spend is going to take a backseat. Is only going to be what's most discretionary. So it would be perhaps either from an entrepreneurial perspective or from looking at, how is it that one can look at more and more, be it essentials, be it most important consumption categories that could be looked at. The lesson, and I'll identify a few other patterns along the way. When we talk about lessons, right, I just feel that, first of all, nobody could have been ready for anything as unprecedented as this enough. And I think all of us have to be ready for at least a 2-year reboot of the economy, at least. And so the only way to respond to this would be how relevant can we be? What can be our speed of response? And in many ways, as painful as it may be, I believe that somewhere the world needed this pause. And in some way, COVID has triggered a very interesting degree of global unity in response, because almost everybody is in it together. So, as you know, the keyword that got highlighted at the beginning of the conversation, that in many ways, globalization has taken a whole new turn of hyper-localization, right? Localization is definitely going to be a theme that one has to look at. So that's one key area. The other question that came in, and I'm clubbing two questions, one from Priyanka and the other from Deshna. So Priyanka's question was, after COVID, what type of businesses can we do for helping people or youth? And Deshna was scope for business opportunities post-COVID. Let me highlight some key themes that are coming around, in this COVID scenario from business perspective, or even from, as you know, KPVG very fluently articulated all the job opportunities that are there. So content is definitely going to be king, and one or two broad-based content. Content can have such amazing permutations and combinations and possibilities. So you could actually create content in any area, and there is going to be consumption of content for sure, because as we are getting more and more digital, content consumption is right from accessibility related content, which is one end of the extreme, be it education, be it entertainment, be it, any form of content, even training. So there's a lot happening around content, different formats of content, right? Not just so audio, video, all of that. So content is going to be really interesting. Logistics, right, of various types. That's another key theme and opportunity area. And if I was to bring down logistics right to the lowest common denominator, I was talking to my cousin who's in the hills of Himalayas, moved away from Mohali during this lockdown. Enterprising young lady. She's actually been looking at creating an app to connect as many villages in the hills of Himachal. And because they anyway have to walk a long way to get their supplies to the townships. So she's trying to she's in a way collaborating with the authorities and getting young folks, teams to take on more and more delivery, last mile delivery from the towns to the villages. So I think a lot can be done in looking at logistics. For example, Ratan Tata just invested in a, enterprise founded by a 17-year-old, right, which was in the pharmaceutical space, in the pharmacy space. And he's come up with a very interesting model where they're taking out the, or rather flattening the supply chain from the pharma companies all the way to the pharmacies. So I think a lot of interesting things can germinate in logistics. Virtual connect and communication, like content, like KPVG, highlighted, and I totally second what he's saying. Nursing is going to be huge, right? Elderly healthcare. In fact, I was extremely encouraged when Paramjit Virji mentioned when we were talking before this that DBM is looking at this space to see how there's a very strong emphasis that DBM has called second innings for elderly healthcare or elderly care. I think there can be a lot of stuff that can be done in the space of elderly care, using digital channels for connect, communication, using video, all of that. Social impact. My belief is any and every entrepreneurial or enterprising model has a social impact, but in itself, there can be so much that could be done around social impact. We are working on something very interesting, which has been germinated of late, taking birth in COVID. How can you take, something which is charity right from the donor straight to the beneficiary through the providers? We'll come to that later. So and also some areas that Anish somewhere highlighted at the beginning. There are a lot of people I see who are taking back to farming because you've got to produce, right? I have a friend of mine who was running a 100 crore company. They clocked 100 crores in turnover as on March in gold jewelry, luxury gold jewelry. Their primary markets were US and Canada. From 100 crores, they've gone down to zero, complete washout. It is another thing that he was anyway contemplating getting into farming. He's completely shutting that down and moving to farming, right? And how can we apply, our be it technology, be it broader worldviews, and take it back to the farms. So in many ways, friends, I think there are going to be some very exciting areas that are going to come out. I would strongly suggest young minds to connect with a lot more forums, entrepreneurial forums, right? It's not always about starting up. It's about connecting with startups. No startup can start up or scale up without people, without enterprising minds. So let's go out there and co-create. I think that's going to be critical. So that's one. Komal, another question is from Komal Shinde, and Komal's question is: will COVID-19 bring unemployment for the youth? I'll perhaps word it the other way around. I think KPVG has already highlighted various areas that could be in demand. But again, going back to one point I perhaps shared with you all, is the way we look at ourselves. How can we be relevant rather than just sitting there and looking for employment as usual employment categories? If you're going to be looking at it with the as usual mindset, definitely there are going to be challenges, right? But if we get out of our comfort zone and start organizing the party rather than just arrive at the party, I think there could be some very interesting opportunities. I think that's critical. So let's ask beautiful questions. Let's look at also asking it differently. About the academic year, Komal, you've also asked, as the academic year of colleges is starting 3 months late, will it affect reducing of holidays, festivals, or the schedule of next academic year? I'll request KPVG to throw some light on that. We Indians love our holidays because we have so many of them anyway. But I think I think we've had enough of a holiday in the lockdown. So let's just go out there and build a life for ourselves. Let's dig in our heels and look at working hard if you really want to get back. Last question is from Jitesh Sadhwani. Will people start using more of online payment method instead of cash? Also, what will be the impact on people's mind for hygiene practices? The first one, undoubtedly, yes, I think digitization is the way forward. Yes, it comes with its own challenges, and it is not just because of COVID. COVID is just obviously somewhere accelerated those. But to a large extent, there will be a lot more online and digital alternatives that will be explored. We have a very dear friend called Mukesh Ambani, who's leading the forefront there anyway, and I'm sure he's not going to let this opportunity go by. Hygiene practices, in India, I think I would say anybody's guess. One would hope it does, but we by nature believe that we are immortal. So when in a land where life insurance is taken still for investment purposes, not because you're going to die, how we apply ourselves to these change in lifestyle, I personally am looking at how it's going to pan out. So net friends, I want to echo one point that has come out of this forum. I definitely believe the future is going to be different, but the future is going to be bright. What we need to do is change the way we look at our future. We cannot look at the future sitting down in our comfort zones or as usual or with the reference points that we've had so far. So let's, like they say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So obviously we've got to this is unusual. It's a pandemic. We've got to get ourselves together. So great, and forums like these just encourage all of us. Super.
Thank you, Manan. Thank you so much. The most of the questions are on education. So Kamar, quickly, if you can take up, there are 4-5 questions more have come with already you have, and I'll keep on sending you. You can go ahead, please, Kamar.
Right. So it's very interesting that a lot of questions are from kids in the 10th and 11th grades. So I'm looking at them and I'll try to bunch them together as I try and endeavor to answer them.
Yeah.
So the first one is, how will students applying next year to colleges abroad and India cope with the high competition, considering many students will be taking a gap year and applying next year? Well, welcome to this big bad world of competition. It was always there. It is there, and it is going to be there. So somewhere you got to get adjusted to the idea that I know I said earlier, don't look at statistics, but I know that is easier said than done. Numbers will matter. So while you are going to be in a world that is going to be highly competitive, you need to understand what will make you shine out. So it's going to be beyond numbers. So it's going to be beyond what you get in your GPAs and etc. And what's that one factor or X factor that will determine your success, even though there may be hundreds of thousands of people. What will determine your success is your ability to communicate, ability to network with people, ability to lead teams, motivate people. All those skills will come in very, very handy. So do not expect and wait for a world or a time where competition will be less. Accept it and in fact embrace it and revel in it. And of course, try to shine through it. Then Sharika Kaul wants to know, how will the current graduating class secure its future in the post-COVID-19 job market? Well, competition again, the same issue of competition, I suppose. So if I'm combining Sharika and Khaira Gore's question, how will the education be affected with systems being online for such a long time? Well, please understand that people adopt and adapt changes. So, for example, we are a small class. We were able to change quickly and move everything that we have online. And obviously, if you moved online as a small class, there are colleges and schools that are more equipped. So even in India, schools have moved online already, and they're delivering effective classes to people sitting at homes. So will the quality of education be affected? Answer is no. The teachers are teaching. In fact, what I realize is when I'm teaching online, my classes are becoming more interactive. They're becoming more fun. I'm able to present more, talk more, interact more. And please understand that a classroom is the place where you learn to question. A classroom is not a place where you go to learn. And that is the first learning you need to understand. As J.J. Krishnamurti once said to a student who's going abroad to do a PhD, like, of course, Anish is doing. And she asked him, "Oh, Gurudev, I'm going to go to UK for a PhD. What do you think about it?" He didn't answer the first time. She asked him a second time, "What do you think, Gurudev? I'm going to do a PhD in Oxford." And he didn't answer it. When she asked him the third time, he said with some irritation in his voice, he says, "What do you want me to comment on?" He says, "You're going to go to learn from a teacher who's going to teach you to the best of his capacity to interpret a book or a system. Whereas your job is to go beyond the learning of the teacher." And that is what a good teacher can do. Will make you investigate, will make you learn, will make you question. So do not worry about systems, how they are taught. Rather, you need to learn to be inquisitive. Remember, there are 3 speakers in this forum today, and all of them come from one particular religion that's called Sikhism. And that first word is Sikh, and the word Sikh means to learn. How you learn and how you question is going to be determining your success in the future. So don't worry about these online things. They're perfectly fine. Arihan has asked a very wonderful question, and I want to address that at some length, which is, as due to the pandemic, as countries will prioritize their own students, so how tough will it be for Indians to go abroad, and will it encourage more students to stay in India? So let us address the elephant in the room, that as of December 2019, when the year ended in America, they had close to 6 million jobs lying unfulfilled in the high IT sector or areas that needed high skills. Those jobs are there. People with skills were not there. If you look at the entire education system, just for example, in America, even if they were to keep producing students and educate everybody in America, there are yet jobs open in the high skills domain that need people from outside. They really cannot fulfill the demand just by their own populations. They will need you, they will depend on you. Now, it is up to you. How do you foresee and take up that challenge? Do you sit down on a corner and say, the world is becoming a big, bad, tough place, it's becoming more competitive. Will the Americans like me? Will the Australians like me? Well, here is a harsh reality. Number one, they have jobs lying unfulfilled. I know Australia closed last year with 600,000 jobs lying unfulfilled. Understand the word unfulfilled again. Jobs are there, people with skills are not there. So please remember, you don't need to look at these issues today. Understand that there are jobs available. You need to develop and get skills, hone them, and jobs will not be an issue for you, whether now or the next 5 years. And Aryan wants to know, will the youth find it as important to go to school as before? I am pretty surprised. When I was in school, I didn't find it important. I don't know if I speak for the other co-hosts as well, but it's an interesting question. Will people find it as interesting to go to school when all classes and examinations are being conducted online with better efficiency and understanding? And that's the twist to the question. If online becomes more interesting, will people want to go to school? And that is what I think we spoke about earlier, that universities and schools have to adapt to this change, adapt to it and adopt this change. And I honestly believe that delivering via online is a very efficient method. And I think in the next 2 to 3 years, India will be seeing a revolution called 5G. And that's going to cause a big disruption in the whole system. And that will also empower us to ensure that we're able to transfer this knowledge to the last and remotest corner of villages across India. So yes, I agree with you on that part, that teaching online will become even more efficient, and therefore will schools rather deliver via the online method? That's a question I think the authorities need to answer, and they really need to look at it seriously. But for a moment, if I look at programs, universities across the world, quite a few of their classes are delivered online even today. Although they may give you a certificate for doing a class or a program in their country, a lot of their programs are delivered already online. So that's an interesting question for India to conquer. And Mahak wants to know, how will school and competitive exams be conducted with proper majors? I think we've addressed that earlier, with pretty efficient levels of delivering classes online. In fact, UGC came out with its guidelines around 3 weeks ago saying that colleges and schools should be allowed to do classes and conduct exams online. And where they're unable to do that, and of course that'll be true for competitive exams as well, where they're unable to do that, they graduated people on a 50-50 kind of a formula. So I do not see a problem in competitive exams being conducted. They were always online. For example, a GRE, GMAT is online, CAT is online, so I don't see an issue over there. And school is becoming online. So I think that the two questions can be joined together. Then Ishika wanted to know about MS. Shall fall 21 be a wise decision? The answer is absolutely. Remember, education is an investment. Do not worry about the time period when you give it. Whether you enter America this year or next year, it should be just fine. I think what you're referring to is the high level of competition, which is connected to what Naisa spoke about earlier, that if a lot of people go in fall 21, the competition levels will rise. Answer is yes, they will rise. But remember 2 points. A, universities are going to be extremely hungry. They are starved of money because international kids bring a lot of money to the economy. For example, there are universities today that are laying off staff. So obviously they're thirsty for students. So next year I will see, and everybody will see this, that their numbers of intakes will rise. So while more people will apply, intakes will also go up. So competition, obviously, is always going to be a supply and a demand issue here. So when there is more demand, supply is also there, it'll be increased as well. So please don't worry about the competition levels. Then how will the current graduating class secure its future where competition, I think the same question. So competition, I'm going to assume has been answered. And Rohan wants to know, in this current pandemic, people are looking for jobs or economic stability. In such a scenario, is it wise to quit a job and go for higher education, such as an MS or MBA? And to that, which in US, Europe, Canada, where pandemic has hit so hard on the economy? Well, Rohan, pandemic has hit the entire world pretty badly. So I'm sure, I'm not an economist here, but I'm pretty sure that in the next 2 to 3 years, economies will recover. There are some economists who believe in a V-shaped kind of a recovery, where you had a very quick downfall and there could be an equally quick recovery. I don't know if that will work, or whether there is a U-based recovery where you go down quickly and then it takes a year or two for the economies to go back up. I don't know which of the two models will work, but whatever it be, if you go next year in 21, you will graduate only in 2023. That's 3 years from today. And 3 years from today, it's a very safe bet that economies will be either recovering or they will have recovered. And when economies recover or they have recovered, they'll be hungry for people with skills. In fact, it becomes paramount importance for you today to get those extra skills for you to be able to succeed in that changed circumstances. So rather than looking at it as a negative, look at it as a positive. You simply have to go abroad, learn those skills to be able to survive in the changed circumstances.
What he means to say is that should he quit his job and go for higher education?
You're going to quit your job next year, Rohan. So you're going to keep working till 2021. So we're not looking you going this year. So you've got a year and a half in which you keep working, and you're going to join whichever be the university in fall, that is August, September, October of next year. So please keep working till you go. Don't sit at home and idle and waste of your time. That could be the worst thing you could possibly do. So keep working till you go. You don't have the visa in the hand, don't quit.
Guruji, can I ask one question?
No, I know that's going to be a tough one.
As a younger student. So in choice of education or subjects, like for example, MBAs and some which have content which have perhaps been still, pre-COVID scenarios, pre-COVID, how do you see us, students, perhaps, like when he talks about MBA, right? Apart from fundamentals, things are so dynamic today. So will education institutes be, will they be able to adapt and come up? So the next 3 years is going to be very different. How do you see it?
So the MBA he spoke about, I think a little later, was sustainability management.
Okay.
And therefore I see a lot of scope for that.
Sure.
So already we're looking at systems engineering coming into play, where they're talking of using better models of engineering, whether it deal with making machinery or making cars or whatever it be. So sustainability management is going to be the mantra in the next few years. I think about this, Manakvirji.
Sure.
When we were young, of course you're yet young, there were 3 fields of MBA. You did an MBA in marketing or finance or HR. That's it.
Yeah.
Today you're talking of a global MBA or an MBA in IT management or MBA in MIS or sustainability management. So there has been a lot of evolution, and that process is not going to stop. It's going to keep changing. And as new challenges keep coming, I'm sure these people who are teaching in universities, then we need to remember, universities like where Anish is studying, there are Nobel Prize winners who teach, and they keep adapting the curriculum to what the circumstances are. In fact, a lot of their curriculum is driven by the industry. And I think that's the ideal thing things should be. Industry is able to dictate and curate curriculums. And I think that is wonderful.
Lovely. Yeah.
So that is a big yes from me. Rohan, you must go abroad and continue your studies. And let us not, I'm not saying this because I'm going to benefit in a way. Rather, I'm saying this because this is the only way. And Vishnu wants to know how students having average backgrounds need to prepare themselves after COVID-19 so they become employable at the earliest. What should they focus more on? I think, Anish, if you like to take that one up. So shall I repeat the question? How students having an average background in studies required to prepare themselves after COVID-19 so they can become employable at the earliest? And last one, he says, where should they focus more?
So I think that really depends, right? Average depends upon what you're average in. Most probably you've chosen a course or you've sort of studied something that you're not good at. And maybe that's something that you're not suited for. What I have always encouraged is that try and find opportunities in fields that seem average but have massive earning potential right now. One of the quickest and easiest things I can suggest is translation. As somebody who's worked in this field, the number of people who need translators right now is immense. And if you are good at one more language, and I think Kaviji, that's a very good point that you raise, that languages are incredibly important. Even somebody who can do a basic English to Hindi translation earns better than most others who will be graduating with some IT degree and working in a call center or anywhere else, or even a basic entry level IT job. So I think focus on industries that are a little hatke. That if you think that you are average, if you think that the chosen field that you are entering is not catering to what you thought you would be able to achieve, then see what other skills you have. Do you have better management skills? Can you handle people well? Can you work in any sort of industry that requires people management? Is there anything that you're good at? A lot of people have been doing, and I don't recommend this so much right now because the market is flooded with them, but graphic design and sort of content creation and smaller level marketing, where you're not sort of designing for Godrej or for sort of Mahindra, but you're doing it for smaller corporations and smaller companies that have smaller budgets, but also there's a wider net of them. And they usually function more on connections that your parents might have, or your friends might have, or family friends might have. So if you can build those skills up quickly, if you're good at learning on the internet, then learning something like Canva or something like basics of Photoshop, if you can get someone's Instagram page running, that's, a lot of young people are earning quickly that way, at least until you can find something that you're good at and you can pivot towards that in your career. But again, average means that you sort of haven't found your niche yet. So try and find what you're good at and propel your way in that direction.
Great. Thank you very much, Anish.
Paramjit, Virji, we have an issue. We have to wind up in 2 minutes.
Yes. So there's one last question Manak wanted to answer, and then I will just conclude within 1 minute.
So no, I wanted to say everybody who's asked questions of me.
That is what I was also going to
say. I am perfectly fine with you pushing it to me on my email ID.
Yeah.
So is my name kpsingh@imfs.co.in. So you can feel free to mail me again, kpsingh@imfs.co.in.
So in fact, we will circulate the mail of all the 3 panelists, and people can send in their questions to us, and then circulate the email ID of DBM also, and we can pass on, and this will continue. This dialogue was not going to end today. In fact, I can tell everybody that we will continue this dialogue. Maybe we'll come again if required, and in any case, answer all the questions. This is the DBM ID that I have given in the chat. Everybody can see that, and we'll connect you to the panelist. Manak, I think there's only 1 minute left.
I think, Viji, I have put my email ID there, and Shubham can connect directly, so we can wrap up.
That's fine. So I'll just quickly thank all the 3 panelists for very, very informative talk, and it is actually good to see all 3 of them are so optimistic about the future, considering that there has been so much despondency around us. And I think the youth will find it very refreshing, the optimism that all the 3 panelists have shown. Only thing is that the new normal, we have to adapt to the new normal. We cannot just look at the way we were there before. We have to keep on changing, adapting, and the future is still ours. So the youth, I think, will note that. And I thank all the youngsters also who joined us today on this talk. And we're very happy to have them, and we'll continue this dialogue. And I also thank my DBM team for supporting this, Mr. Parvinder Singh, Deshna, Ishika, and Noor, and some other volunteers, Sharika, who have helped us organize this. So thank you all very much, and look forward to again other engaging talk in future. Thank you.
And I think, Viji, on behalf of all of us, we would like to thank you and DBM I think it's amazing to do this, what we've done, and thank you so much for all of
Thank you.
us to be here.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, friends, see you soon. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.